Neon Prime, a video game in development by Valve Software from 2021 to 2022. The project was cancelled and instead reinvented as the now hit video game Deadlock. In today's video, I want to take you through that transition from cancellation to reinvention. This is Caldera Trooper.
What is Caldera Trooper? A great question, and one that I'll be giving you the answer to during this video. My name is Jacky, and today on the Dead Air channel, I'm going to be uncovering and unveiling everything we at Dead Air have discovered about Deadlock's forgotten past. So walk with me now as we go back and uncover Neon Prime.
You'll instantly notice the stark contrast of themes. Neon Prime was bright, with lights and neon bringing ambience to the map. Deadlock's version of Caldera, when it was undergoing its changes and thematic overwrite, is far grittier, more modernized and grounded in reality. Whereas looking back, you can even see references to Half-Life and the Combine, alongside a more cartoony and vibrant feel, where the contrast is completely different in Neon Prime. Even the enemies that you use for jungle camps or mid-boss were vastly overhauled, going from sentry guns and robotic in nature to more old god and Cthulhu-esque creatures with a dark aura of mystery surrounding them. Shots like this show the best contrast as well. With Kelvin, you see how much his old design affected the creation of his latest character model. Here you get a great shot with Hornet, Vindicta's predecessor. The way both of these shots line up, you can see ideas were carried over from Caldera but completely redesigned. It wasn't quite the map that we got late into Deadlock's development, but it certainly wasn't Caldera from Neon Prime. With Dynamo, there's a fun fact as well. You can see he looks incredibly similar to his older counterpart Sumo. And inside the game files, you can find the song that you've been listening to, which is supposed to be the main menu music for Neon Prime. This was hidden on Cadence, a work-in-progress hero that uses his old model with a Viking hat.
So much of what inspired Deadlock to become Deadlock would never have happened without Neon Prime going as far into development as it did. In June of 2022, Neon Prime's art style took shape and development began on the game that we would know and never get to play. As we get into fall of 2022, Neon Prime was finally trademarked. However, that same season, in one foul swoop, the game was axed. June 13th, the art style for Neon Prime was rapidly changing. Valve were pivoting to their new, grittier theme. It wasn't quite Deadlock, but it certainly wasn't Neon Prime. On July 12th, Caldera Trooper was finally compiled. This is the version that I'm going to be showing off in today's video. The map that was the transitional playground from Neon Prime's Caldera into the cursed apple that we play on modern Deadlock.
Caldera Trooper. On the top of your screen, you can see the work-in-progress map, and on the bottom, it's modern-day cursed apple. Let's have a look then at Mid-Temple and take you on a guided tour through each and every nook and cranny of Caldera Trooper and show you all the secrets that it has in store. Mid-Temple looked very different at this point in development, with far more verticality, open windows, different ledges, multiple areas that you could clamber up to. I quite like how open it was at this point, but you can see how they refined it and moved forward with Deadlock's development. Let's start off with York Lane then. This is a particularly beautiful part of the map. Everything has a hint of yellow. Somewhere, even if it's just subtle enough that your eyes catch it, you'll notice that you're in York Lane by the yellow theming that's spread throughout this entire pretty piece of the map. Ideas like this have finally started finding their way into modern day Deadlock as well, with the theming on buildings in the current version of the game getting yellow accents, yellow smoke, different props that color coordinate so that you know what area of the map you're in. But you can see on Caldera Trooper the idea went so much further, with entire pieces of the map being thematically driven, with one color being the design philosophy behind that environment. But you can see here, there's a reason why the factory exists in current day Deadlock, and that's because a lot of these assets were here on Caldera Trooper. A far more futuristic workplace, sure, but that idea was re-adapted and translated back into the game with a bit of a more mechanical, brutal style, showing the working half of the cursed apple. The old jungle camps had very interesting designed buildings. This one looks to be like a fishmonger. I do like overall the way this entire portion of the map looks though. I think it's particularly pretty with a lot of the accents and details, really tying it all together. And although this was just a playground to test between two different themes, it makes you wish some of this survived into Deadlock's development. It's nowhere near as competitive in terms of a layout for raw skill expression that I think Deadlock does so well, but in terms of just being nice to look at and having a fun visual theme, it does bits. You can see on the contrast here how much darker and stripped down of additional details Deadlock's version of the map is, wanting the play space to be more optimized for competitive play and fit the newer theme. Everything was just a lot brighter on Caldera Trooper, is another thing that you'll notice. I imagine some of this is because the lighting isn't final, but in Deadlock everything is dark, dull, dank, and wants you to feel like it's a little bit more oppressed to fit the timeline. Orchard Lane has a lot of those similarities as well. One of the big surprises though is the fact that this prefab was clearly built quite early on. The Granite City Garage is one of the only buildings that looks nearly one-to-one to its current day counterpart, with the only drastic changes being that in current day Deadlock it's got ropes where a lot of the ladders used to be. But you can see how much Orange Lane had already taken shape in terms of some of the key jungle buildings, set points on the lane as well, with the garage and other various locations only really being adapted in terms of their visual facade and overall style. Any shots that you get of Midday on Orange really hammer home just how important verticality was at this point in Deadlock's development. You can see when they were transitioning from Neon Prime, they really went gung-ho with the idea of having multiple different ways to navigate around the map, with ledges, sky paths, underground nooks and crannies, all kinds of different areas that would have provided for very interesting vertical-based fights in lane. Now, let's take a walk into one of my favourite areas in the map. This is by far one of the prettiest parts of the map and would make you want to go shopping. So many little Easter eggs here and cool details sprinkled in, but Blue and Orange Lane are blessed with the map design here in terms of this fun futuristic shopping alley that exists on both parts of the map. The sad bit is the things that make this so fun aren't really recreatable in Deadlock, as it just wouldn't fit the theme. I wish it still existed, as I love the arcade and all the little details that are sprinkled in, but it just doesn't fit the newer theme of Deadlock. You can see why you'd also sometimes hear a call out about a garage, as previously an entire garage parking area used to exist on both sides of the map. Makes sense why some of those call outs occasionally bled over. Looking around on the blue side of things though, it's still just as pretty. I recommend taking some time to pause these screenshots, as there's so many hidden details hidden in these frames that it's worth having a bit of an eagle eye look at. Some of the older models, just for the motorbikes and various props as well, are so cool that it's a shame it's all going to be left in the past. Running out from Blue Lane though, let's have a look at how Broadway looks overall, as we haven't really seen the full lane. Now, similar to Orchard, it's mirrored in the sense that you have a lot of this verticality, but there is quite a few differences in terms of the props that are used and some of the layout choices. In this one-to-one comparison, you can see how it used to look and how the map was actually a little bit more condensed as we make our move over towards the purple lane side. You can see the contrast of how Blue Lane used to look compared to how it looks in modern day Deadlock. Again though, you notice there was a lot more blue. Every texture that could support some sort of blue theming feels like it was given a good go over with a lick of paint at this point in development. Hell, even signs that had blue accents have now become more orange and red, which I find particularly interesting. Also, if you've kept your eyes open, you'd notice these candles that are all over Deadlock's map are quite an old asset that was being reused from Caldera Trooper with a nice new texture just slapped onto it. Shots like this give you a great taste of how the map has changed as well when you look back on it. It's always crazy to see the one-to-one differences of some of the big building overhauls where they had these initial ideas, just blocky cubes that were fleshed out into really pretty looking parts of the Cursed Apple skyline. And when you look at the buildings and the way it all ties together, Blue Lane might not be the prettiest of the lanes on Caldera Trooper, but it certainly has some appeal. Over on Park, or Purple, you can see that a graveyard futuristic theme, almost with alien runes and an air of mystery, is the direction they went. This entire area reminds me so much of Risk of Rain, and I think it's a particularly pretty piece of the map. Purple and York really did get the blessing of Valve's developers on this one, with the running water on York, the nice green lusciousness, and then this almost mysterious, eerie graveyard that you can imagine, especially during the dark theme when the map was set at nighttime, would have been lit up by this almost odd ambient glow of purple engulfing every inch of what you see. I love it. I think it's such a pretty part of the map, and it really makes me wish that we had some of these elements translated over. In every one of these shots, the thing that sticks out like a sore thumb is just how much purple is always on screen. And I think that's something we'll see happening to modern Deadlock more and more as it's being taken through its development cycle. We've already seen more purple pop up, and it was one of the first lanes, if memory serves me correctly, that got that treatment with purple streaks, accents on the buildings, and smoke popping up. I'd love to see it taken even further though. This is another great part, an arcade building where you can see some sort of futuristic skee ball game. Let's get the contrast of the bases then. Neon Prime's base versus the most modern iteration of the base in Deadlock. Now, Deadlock's been rapidly changing its base design even over the past few months, so it's hard to get a direct comparison, but you can see how it's always had a similar overall theme. Of course, it's just the fact that there's now a patron rather than the core being the central focus of a game of Neon Prime. Teleporters also looked really pretty back on Caldera Trooper. I love the theme of all of the different teleporter rooms, as it felt like each lane and each teleporter had a bit of a different flair to it. Now, teleporters have obviously been massively overhauled in modern day Deadlock and do have a very cool model with a callback to not only Portal 2 but Doctor Who as well, with a TARDIS shaped design. But rooms like this had so much elegance in my mind, and I did like how clear and bright the visuals were. So the teleporters of the past, pretty damn cool.
Now I want to show you some of the oddities that remain in Caldera Trooper. A time capsule of Valve's development of Deadlock with some interesting nuggets left to be found. Come with me as we explore some of these strange oddities.
The first thing I want to start off with is the Hyperline shelters. Now, like bus shelters in the modern day, this is where you'd wait to hop on the Hyperline, which, as we've now learned, is the original name of the zip lines that you use to navigate around the Cursed Apple in Deadlock. You can see it spelt out here, stylized as Hyperline. Pretty cool. Also, one of the other things I thought was particularly interesting is how the little zap rods that are hidden on top of buildings in modern day Deadlock, and the way that you can visually see you're not allowed to get on top of too tall of a roof, were tested back here on Caldera Trooper, with the asset for the zap rods being carried over from Neon Prime, but all they did was slightly bury the base plate into the roof of the building so you couldn't see it. Now, there was a ton of ladders back then as well, and checking it out in the Source 2 viewer, you can see that they were called actually function_citadel_ladder, which means they were intended to be used for gameplay. There's so many of these ladders sprinkled throughout Caldera Trooper, and interestingly, a lot of them are in positions where you can make the jump by mantling and double jumping, almost like they were being used to just indicate where you could climb up, using the ladders as a visual aid before the gameplay was integrated. Interesting stuff to look back on. Another cool oddity is the graffiti. I love this one. It reminds me particularly of the Interloper YouTube series from Half-Life 2, and a lot of the cool old graffitis that you can see almost look like weird hybrid versions of CSGO player graffitis, or overall sprays from CS that have been reimagined in their own twisted, not quite the same way. It's pretty sick actually, so I did like having a look at the graffiti. Here's another oddity. You can see on Blue Lane there's an orange part of the bridge that isn't there on the orange side of things, and how Sad Coffee Co. became Happy Panda Coffee Co. So this sad panda is now happy. So there's one good timeline here with Deadlock. The pandas were far happier. I also found this on Park Lane, where you can see at one point this huge catwalk/walkway connected through a building that was placed over the top of it that even has a spawner for a box inside. Kind of interesting. This was another weird detail as well. I believe this is part of a skybox controller that sticks out of the roof towards Purple Lane. I wanted to have a look at the base ladders. I thought this was a really cool mechanic that was left in the past, but there seems to be deployable ladders that would open up or drop down at a certain point during gameplay. Kind of interesting to see where Valve were going with that. I thought this might have been what caused the inspiration for the lighting over on Yellow and Purple Lane in the modern day Deadlock, as Valve were experimenting with the ambient lighting. And if you remember correctly, originally it was green, these lighting sources with smoke across the entire map, before they changed it in recent updates.
Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe and comment your favorite part about Caldera Trooper. This is a bit of a love letter to Valve Software's development of the game that went on to become Deadlock. It's been very cool exploring this leftover time capsule of the game, and I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you next time here on the Dead Air channel with more Deadlock content. For now though, I've been your host Jacky, and this has been Caldera Trooper and the history of Neon Prime.